From my earliest memories, the contrast between how they treated me and my younger sister Katie was stark and painful. My name is Emily, and this is the story of how my own family betrayed me, and how I rose above it all. Katie was born just a year after me, and from the moment she arrived, it was clear she would be the golden child. Our parents, Mark and Sarah Harrison, showered her with attention while I lingered in the shadows. Every milestone, every achievement, every moment seemed to revolve around Katie. I remember my 10th birthday vividly. While Katie had received a lavish party with bouncy castles and professional entertainers just months before, my celebration consisted of a simple cake after dinner. "We're a bit tight on money this month," Emily, Mom had said, though somehow they managed to buy Katie a new iPad the following week. The disparity went beyond material things. When Katie spoke at dinner, our parents hung on her every word. When I tried to share my day, Dad would often cut me off with a distracted "that's nice, honey," while scrolling through his phone. The weight of their indifference was crushing. But the most frustrating part was the food situation. Katie had a severe peanut allergy, and instead of just managing her diet separately, my parents enforced a complete peanut ban in our house. I loved peanut butter sandwiches. They were my favorite lunch, but I wasn't allowed to have them, even at school. "It's not fair," I remember telling my grandmother Rose one afternoon while helping her bake cookies. "Why do I have to eat everything Katie eats? I don't have allergies." Grandma Rose was my sanctuary, the one person who saw me for who I was. Her warm kitchen became my refuge, a place where I could speak freely without fear of being dismissed or overlooked. "Your parents are making a mistake, sweetheart," she'd say, her wise eyes filled with understanding. "They think they're doing what's best, but they're not seeing how it affects you." I watched her measure flour into a bowl, the familiar motions comforting. Yesterday, Mom bought Katie new dance shoes because she said she might want to take lessons. But when I asked to join the science club, she said it was too expensive. Grandma Rose's face hardened. "I've tried talking to your mother about this, Emily. Just last week, I told her she needs to treat you both equally." "But Sarah," she sighed, shaking her head. "She claims Katie is more talented, more outgoing. Says you're too introverted, that it's harder to connect with you." Her words stung, but they weren't surprising. I'd overheard similar conversations before, my parents discussing how Katie was the special one, the daughter with all the potential. Meanwhile, I was just there. The quiet one, the less talented one. The one they had to accommodate but never really saw. While Katie's schedule was packed with dance classes, piano lessons, and art workshops, I spent my afternoons alone in my room, watching life pass by through my window. "Katie has such natural talent," Mom would gush at dinner. "Her dance instructor says she could go professional someday." Dad would beam with pride, while I pushed my food around my plate, invisible as always. But everything changed when I turned 12. Grandma Rose showed up one Saturday morning, her eyes twinkling with excitement. "Get your coat, Emily," she announced. "I've enrolled you in the Advanced Young Scientists program at the community center." That program changed my life. Suddenly, I was immersed in a world of experiments, equations, and endless possibilities. Our instructor, Dr. Chen, didn't see a quiet introvert, he saw a curious mind hungry for knowledge. When I correctly solved a complex algebra problem in my first week, he high-fived me in front of the whole class. By 14, I wasn't just excelling in science and math, I was standing at podiums, articulating arguments about climate change and social justice. People actually listened when I spoke. The shy girl who used to hide in her room was gone, replaced by someone confident, someone with opinions and the courage to express them. Emily's presentation on renewable energy was outstanding, my debate coach told my parents at a school meeting. "She has a real future in scientific research if she wants it." I'll never forget Katie's face that day, the way her smile tightened, her eyes narrowed. She wasn't used to sharing the spotlight, and my growing popularity at school clearly bothered her. The changes were obvious to everyone. People started stopping by my locker between classes. I was elected to the student council. Suddenly, I had friends who valued my opinions, who invited me to study groups and weekend hangouts. For the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged somewhere. That's when Katie started her whisper campaign. "Mom, Dad," I heard her one evening, her voice dripping with fake concern. "I saw Emily behind the gym today. She was kissing Tommy Martinez. And last week, it was Jake from her debate team." I burst into the kitchen. "That's a lie. I've never." "Katie wouldn't make this up," Mom cut me off. "She's worried about you, Emily. These boys, these late-night study sessions, it's not appropriate." "But I'm just..." "No more going out after 6, Dad announced. And we'll be monitoring your phone calls from now on. It's for your own good, Emily." "What about my debate team meetings? My science club?" "You can participate in school activities," Mom said. "But afterward, you come straight home. No exceptions." I looked at Katie, who was hiding a smirk behind her hand. She'd won again, and we both knew it. My newfound freedom was being stripped away, all because of her lies. As we grew up, Katie's antagonism toward me grew more pronounced. It wasn't enough for her to control my social life through our parents. She started targeting my belongings and the few friendships I'd managed to maintain despite the restrictions. One morning, I found my science project drenched in water, the careful calculations I'd spent weeks on bleeding into illegible smears. Another time, my favorite sweater, a birthday gift from Grandma Rose, mysteriously ended up with bleach stains. But the worst was what she did to my friendship with Rachel. We'd been close since middle school, bonding over our love of biology and bad reality TV shows. Rachel was one of the few friends who stuck by me despite Katie's previous rumors, but even she had her breaking point. "How could you?" Rachel confronted me one day at my locker, her eyes filled with tears. "Katie told me everything, how you write about Matt in your diary, how you're planning to steal him from me." "Rachel, that's insane. I don't even have a diary, and I've never." But Rachel was already walking away, leaving me standing alone in the hallway. That evening, I cornered Katie in her room. "Why are you doing this?" I demanded. "Why do you have to destroy everything good in my life?" "You're paranoid, Emily," she replied coolly. "Maybe if you stopped obsessing over me and making up stories, you'd have more friends." I wanted to scream. Somehow, she always managed to twist things around, making me sound like the crazy one. And our parents? They never questioned her version of events. Then came Katie's 15th birthday. Mom spent days preparing for it, determined to make it perfect. The house was decorated with pink and gold balloons, and relatives filled every corner of our living room. The cake was Mom's masterpiece, 3 tiers of vanilla buttercream, Katie's favorite. Everyone gathered around to sing "Happy Birthday," and Katie blew out her candles to enthusiastic applause. But something was wrong. After a few bites, Katie's face changed. Her hand went to her throat, her eyes widening in panic. Mom recognized the signs immediately, an allergic reaction. "The EpiPen," Dad shouted, already running for Katie's emergency kit. Mom held Katie's hand while Dad administered the injection, and gradually, her breathing steadied. The party atmosphere evaporated instantly. Relatives huddled in concerned groups, while my parents tried to understand what had happened. "How did peanuts get in the cake?" Mom kept asking, checking and rechecking her recipe. I was so careful. That's when Katie spoke up, her voice still raspy. "I saw Emily in the kitchen earlier. She was doing something with the cake." "What? No," I protested. "I wasn't even near the cake." But Katie pressed on. "Check her purse," she whispered. "The blue one, by the door." Dad grabbed my purse before I could react. And there it was, a small jar of peanut butter, one I'd never seen before, sitting right on top of my wallet. "She could have died," Dad's voice boomed through the living room. "What were you thinking, Emily?" I stood there, trembling, as my parents hurled accusations at me. The jar of peanut butter in Dad's hand might as well have been a smoking gun. "I didn't do it," I repeated, my voice getting smaller each time. Please, you have to believe me. Katie sat on the couch, an oxygen mask still near her face, but I caught the slight upturn of her lips. She was enjoying this, enjoying watching my world crumble around me. Our relatives shifted uncomfortably, whispering among themselves. Aunt Jane pulled her daughter closer, as if I might try to poison her next. Uncle Bob wouldn't even meet my eyes. The only person who moved toward me instead of away was Grandma Rose. Now wait just a minute, Grandma's voice cut through the chaos. Everyone needs to calm down and think about this rationally. Did anyone see Emily put it there? This needs to be properly investigated. Everything is already clear, Dad interrupted. Emily, go to your room. We'll deal with this later. The next few days were a nightmare. At home, my parents acted like I was invisible. They'd leave the room when I entered, lock away all the food, and whisper behind closed doors. At school, word spread quickly. People moved away when I walked down the hallways, as if attempted murder was contagious. After 3 days of this torture, I couldn't take it anymore. I found Katie alone in her room, scrolling through her phone. You need to tell them the truth, I said, closing the door behind me. This has gone far enough. Katie looked up, and the smile she gave me was chilling. You know what's funny, she said, setting her phone down. I've been planning this for months. Waiting for the perfect moment. The birthday party was just perfect timing. Something snapped inside me. Years of pent-up frustration, anger, and hurt exploded. I lunged at her, grabbing her shoulders. We crashed to the floor, knocking over her bedside lamp. The noise brought our parents running. They found us wrestling on the ground, both screaming. She confessed, I shouted as Dad pulled me off Katie. She just told me she planned the whole thing. She planted the peanut butter in my purse. Stop lying, Katie shrieked, crocodile tears already flowing. See? She's crazy. She attacked me. That's enough. Mom's voice was ice cold. Pack your things, Emily. We can't have you in this house anymore. What? No, please. You're dangerous, Dad declared. We'll call your grandmother. Either she picks you up by morning, or we're calling social services. I fell to my knees, begging them to listen, to understand. But their faces were stone. Katie stood behind them, and through my tears, I could see her satisfied smile. Grandma arrived at dawn, her ancient station wagon idling in our driveway. As I loaded my hastily packed bags into her car, she confronted my parents one last time. What you're doing is despicable, she told them. You're choosing to believe a lie over your own daughter. Someday you'll realize what you've done, and it'll be too late. They didn't respond. They just stood in the doorway, Katie between them, watching as Grandma drove me away from the only home I'd ever known. Living with Grandma Rose was like finally being able to breathe after years of suffocation. Within a month, she had legally adopted me, handled all the paperwork for my transfer to Riverside High School, and converted her sewing room into my bedroom. At Riverside, nobody knew about the birthday party incident or Katie's lies. I was just the new girl with good grades and a quiet smile. Slowly, I started making friends again, real friends this time, who didn't have Katie whispering poison in their ears. I threw myself into my studies with renewed passion. Without Katie's drama and my parents' constant criticism, I flourished. My SAT scores were nearly perfect. I graduated as valedictorian, my speech focusing on resilience and the power of second chances. My parents didn't come to the graduation ceremony. I'd sent them an invitation, more out of formality than hope, but received no response. It hurt, but less than I expected. Grandma Rose's proud tears as I accepted my diploma meant more than their absence. I'd been accepted to several prestigious medical programs, but the tuition fees were daunting. Before I could even mention student loans, Grandma Rose pulled out a folder. I've been saving for this since you were 12, she said, showing me her college fund for me. I always knew you were meant for great things. Those 4 years of dental school were intense but rewarding. I lived in a tiny apartment near campus, worked part-time at a cafe, and studied until my eyes burned. Through it all, Grandma Rose was my rock, listening to my excited phone calls about successful procedures, and never once doubting my chosen path. I had no contact with my parents or Katie during this time. Sometimes I'd see updates about them on social media: Katie's job at a local retail store, Mom's garden club awards, Dad's bowling league victories. I'd scroll past them quickly, refusing to let their lives intersect with mine. Finally, after years of hard work, I held my dental license in my hands. My first job offer came from Brighton Dental Associates, one of the most respected private practices in the city. I posted a photo of my diploma and license on Facebook, adding a simple caption: Dr. Emily Harrison, DDS. Dreams do come true. The response was overwhelming. Old school friends, distant relatives, even my third-grade teacher left congratulatory comments. Aunt Jane, who'd pulled her daughter away from me at that fateful birthday party, wrote, "We're all so proud of you, Emily." Uncle Bob posted, "Incredible achievement, kiddo." Looking at those messages, I realized something profound. I'd done more than just survive my family's betrayal, I'd transformed it into fuel for my success. My phone rang on a quiet Sunday afternoon. The number was familiar, though I hadn't seen it flash across my screen in years. Mom. My hand shook as I debated whether to answer. "Hello?" I finally said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Emily, sweetie." Mom's voice was syrupy sweet, the tone she used to use when asking Katie's teachers for deadline extensions. "We saw your announcement about becoming a dentist. We're so proud of you." I said nothing, waiting. "We've been thinking about you," she continued, filling my silence. "Your father and I, well, we'd love to have you over for dinner. Just to catch up. As a family." I shouldn't have agreed. Every instinct told me to decline. But curiosity, or maybe that stubborn little part of me that still craved their approval, won out. "What time?" I heard myself asking. The next evening, I pulled up to my childhood home in my new Mercedes. The house looked smaller than I remembered, the paint peeling slightly around the windows. I dressed carefully: designer blouse, tailored pants, the pearl earrings Grandma Rose had given me for graduation. Armor, in its own way. Mom opened the door before I could knock. "Emily." She moved as if to hug me, then seemed to think better of it. Come in, you look so professional." Dad stood awkwardly in the living room. "Hey, kiddo." He'd aged more than I expected, his hair completely gray now, new lines around his eyes. "Is Katie joining us?" I asked, noting the table was set for 3. "Oh, no, she's busy tonight," Mom said quickly. "I made your favorite, pot roast." "Well, what used to be your favorite?" Dinner was a strange dance of forced smiles and careful questions. They asked about dental school, about my practice, about where I was living now. I answered politely but briefly, offering no openings for deeper conversation. "So," Dad said, pushing his potatoes around his plate, "dentistry must be lucrative?" And there it was. "I do all right," I replied neutrally. "She drives a Mercedes, Mark," Mom commented, as if I wasn't sitting right there. "And you mentioned an apartment, Emily?" "Yes, I bought a place downtown." "With a mortgage, of course." They exchanged glances. Mom set down her fork with a sigh that seemed rehearsed. "Emily, we've been having some difficulties," she began. "Your father, well, the company downsized last month. And my arthritis is making it harder to maintain my full schedule at the salon." "That must be tough," I said, taking a sip of water. "We were wondering." Dad cleared his throat. "That is, maybe you could." "Have you asked Katie for help?" I interrupted. Mom's face fell. "Katie's struggling too. Retail doesn't pay much, and she's barely making ends meet as it is." I placed my napkin on the table and stood up. "Well, I'm sorry to hear about your situation, but I won't be able to help." I heard them calling after me as I walked to my car, but I didn't look back. The message from Mom came during my lunch break at the clinic. Emily, we need $20,000. Your father and I are about to lose the house. As our daughter, you have an obligation to help us. I stared at my phone, a strange calm settling over me. Finally, an opportunity. I'll give you the money, I typed back, on one condition: publicly admit on social media that I never put peanuts in Katie's birthday cake. Admit that you threw me out of the house because of Katie's lies. Tell everyone the truth. The typing bubble appeared and disappeared several times. Finally, after what seemed like hours, her response came through: we can't do that. It would destroy our family's reputation in the community. People would judge us. Surely you understand? I laughed without humor. Then you understand that I won't be giving you any money. Surely you understand? The response was immediate this time: after everything we've done for you. I turned off my phone and went back to work. 2 hours later, during my afternoon break, I saw Katie's name light up my screen. Something made me hit the record button before answering. Hello, Katie. You heartless bitch, she snarled, her voice dripping with venom. Mom's crying because of you. They're about to lose everything, and you're playing games? I'm not playing games, I replied calmly. I'm asking for the truth. I want them to admit what they did to me. What you did to me. Never going to happen, sis. You know why? Because it would hurt me. And they'll never do anything to hurt their precious Katie. Her voice took on a sing-song quality. They've always loved me more, you know. Even after I told them about the peanut butter. My heart stopped. What do you mean? Oh, didn't you know? She laughed again, the sound chilling. A few months after you left, I told them I planted that jar in your purse. They didn't even care. Dad just said it was probably for the best that you were gone anyway. That's how much they prefer me over you. My hands were shaking, but I kept my voice steady. You admitted it to them? Of course I did. I was so proud of my plan, I had to tell someone. And guess what? They didn't care. Each word was punctuated with malicious glee. They'll never admit it publicly because it would make me look bad. So you can forget about your little confession demand. The line went dead. I sat there, staring at my phone, the recording safely saved. After all these years, I finally had proof. My sister's voice, admitting to everything: the setup, the lies, our parents' willful blindness. With steady hands, I crafted the Facebook post that would change everything. No dramatics, no accusations, just the truth, finally set free. Many of you remember the incident at my sister's 15th birthday party, I wrote. The day my parents kicked me out of their house for allegedly trying to harm my sister with peanuts. For years, I've carried the weight of that false accusation. Today, I'm sharing my story not out of vengeance, but because the truth deserves to be heard. I detailed everything: the years of favoritism, Katie's escalating lies, my parents' blind devotion to her. I explained how they'd recently reached out, not to apologize, but to demand $20,000 from me. And now, I wrote, I have proof of what really happened that day. Listen to this recent conversation with my sister. I attached the audio file. Katie's voice, clear as day, bragging about planting the peanut butter in my purse. Admitting that our parents knew the truth but chose to protect her anyway. The cruel laugh as she described their indifference to ruining my life. Within minutes, the post exploded. Aunt Jane wrote a lengthy apology. Uncle Bob called me directly, his voice thick with tears as he expressed his regret for believing the lies. Even my old friend Rachel reached out, finally understanding why our friendship had really ended. Then came the angry messages from my family. Take that down immediately, Mom demanded via text. You're destroying this family, Dad bellowed in a voicemail. I'll sue you for recording me without permission, Katie threatened. I responded to them all with the same message: all communications are being recorded and archived. My lawyer has copies of everything. Any threats or harassment will be dealt with legally. Please do not contact me again unless it's through proper legal channels. They must have finally realized I wasn't that powerless teenage girl anymore. The messages stopped. The calls ended. The social media harassment ceased. Grandma Rose came over the night after I made the post, carrying a bottle of champagne. "To the truth," she said, pouring us each a glass. "And to you, my brave girl. I couldn't have done any of this without you," I told her, fighting back tears. "You were the only one who believed in me when everyone else turned away." She took my hand, her eyes bright with pride. "I never doubted you for a second. And look at you now, successful, strong, finally free of their lies. Do you think they'll ever admit what they did? Try to make amends?" Grandma Rose shook her head. "Some people would rather live with their lies than face the truth about themselves. But that's their burden to bear, not yours." She was right, of course. She usually is. My parents and Katie chose their path long ago, just as I chose mine. They'll have to live with the consequences of their choices, just as I built a life from mine. These days, I focus on my practice, my friends, and my relationship with Grandma Rose, the one true parent I've ever known. The past doesn't haunt me anymore.
This story is titled, "My wife refused to spend her birthday with me and went out to have dinner with her coworker, but she thought I was bluffing when I told her I would file for divorce." Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Hi Reddit. I don't usually post personal stuff here, but I wanted to tell this story because it's been a wild ride, and honestly, I could use some outside perspective, or maybe just some validation. I was with my wife for 14 years, married for 12 of them. Was it perfect? Number. But no marriages, right? We had ups and downs, but I always thought we'd face everything together. The thought of us splitting never even crossed my mind. She wasn't just my wife, she was my partner, my best friend, the person I thought had my back through thick and thin. Then, in September 2022, my life changed. I was in a car accident. No, scratch that. A bad accident. I was driving to a work site. I'm an HVAC tech, or at least I was. And out of nowhere, a garbage truck slammed into my car. High speed. All I remember was the sound of the impact, glass shattering, and my head hitting the side of the door. I swear time slowed down in that moment. When I came to, there were people pulling me out, asking me if I could move my legs or arms. I didn't even understand what was happening at first. I was too out of it. Here's the thing. I didn't break anything, thank God. At first, I thought I'd walked away lucky, but within days the pain started. It was this deep, burning pain in my lower back, like someone had lodged a knife in there and just left it. At first, I thought it would go away, but it didn't. I tried to tough it out. My wife was supportive at first, helping me with little things around the house, telling me it was just temporary. But after about 2 months of me limping around, things shifted. I can't pinpoint exactly when, but I started noticing her sighing more, or the way she'd roll her eyes when I asked her to grab something I couldn't bend down to get. Little things. At the time, I told myself it was stress. After all, me not working meant we were down to one income, and I know that's hard. But still, something was different. By December 2022, I tried to go back to work. My doctor wasn't happy about it, but I hated feeling useless. I convinced him to let me try, and I gave it everything I had. I lasted 3 days before I collapsed while loading tools into my van. The pain was unbearable. My boss told me to go home, and my doctor officially took me off work indefinitely. That's when the reality hit me. I wasn't going back anytime soon. I felt like I was letting my wife down. I'd always been the kind of guy who pulled his weight. I worked hard, paid bills, fixed things around the house. Now I was broken, and I couldn't help but feel like a burden. I tried to keep my spirits up. I applied for financial help to cover the mortgage and bills. We qualified, which helped take some pressure off her. I thought maybe things would calm down, and we'd get back to normal. But then came May 2023, the appendix incident. I woke up in the middle of the night drenched in sweat. My stomach felt like it was being ripped apart from the inside. I tried to tough it out for a few hours, but the pain just kept getting worse. Around 5 a.m., I woke her up and told her, "Something's wrong. I need to go to the hospital." She groaned and looked at me like I'd asked her to do the most annoying thing in the world. Are you sure it's that serious? I couldn't believe it. I was literally doubled over in pain. I told her, yes, I need to go now. And you know what she did? She fixed her hair and makeup before we left. I sat in the car, hunched over, waiting for her to be ready. She refused to drive too, so I had to drive myself to the ER with her sitting next to me. I don't even know how I managed it. At the hospital, the doctors told me my appendix had ruptured. I needed emergency surgery and fast. After the surgery, they told me there was an infection, so they wanted to keep me overnight for observation. I called my wife and asked if she could stay with me, or at least take a couple of days off to help me recover at home. Her response? I can't. I have work. I get it. Work's important. But I was laying in a hospital bed with an infection in my gut, and she couldn't even take one day. I remember laying there alone that night, hooked up to machines and thinking, what the hell happened to us? When I got home the next day, she barely said anything. No, how are you feeling? Or, do you need anything? Nothing. It was like I was just an inconvenience in her life. I started questioning everything at that point. Looking back, that was probably when I started losing hope. But instead of confronting it, I shoved it down. I told myself she was just stressed, that she didn't mean to act like she didn't care. I ignored the signs. I didn't want to believe things were falling apart. I think the worst part was that I felt alone. Even though she was right there in the same house, I felt completely alone. I wanted to talk to her about how I was feeling, how scared I was about my health and my job and our future. But every time I tried to open up, she shut me down. She'd sigh or tell me, it'll be fine, in this dismissive way that made it clear she didn't want to talk about it. By the time June rolled around, I was starting to see just how far apart we'd drifted. It was like living with a roommate instead of a wife. I thought maybe we could fix it, that things would get better once I started feeling better physically. I was wrong. So by June 2023, things between us were getting worse. Not just off, but noticeably tense, like walking on eggshells in my own home. I felt like everything I did annoyed her. If I asked for help, she acted like it was such a burden. If I didn't ask for help and tried to do something on my own, she'd roll her eyes like I was being dramatic. I didn't know how to win anymore. Around that time, we were sitting on the couch one evening. The TV was on, but I wasn't really paying attention. She made some offhand comment about how she's back paid in this marriage now. I stared at her for a second, trying to figure out if I heard her right. I asked, back paid? What's that supposed to mean? She gave me this look, half smiling but annoyed, and said something like, well, I've been holding everything down for months now, paying bills, taking care of things. I wasn't mad, more shocked. I joked back, don't let the door hit you on the way out then. It was stupid, I know. But I said it jokingly, the same way couples poke fun at each other. I thought we'd laugh it off and move on. She didn't. Her face dropped and she snapped back, you think that's funny? Do you have any idea how trapped I feel right now? I didn't know what to say. Trapped? I'd been dealing with my accident, the back pain, surgery, all of it. I wasn't asking for her sympathy. I just needed her to hang in there with me. I told her, look, I get it. This situation sucks for both of us. I know I haven't been able to work, but I'm doing everything I can to fix it. I applied for financial help for the mortgage so you wouldn't have to do everything alone. She shrugged like it didn't matter. Yeah, but I'm still the one paying for everything. It stung. I felt like no matter what I did, it wasn't enough. I didn't bring it up again because I thought maybe she just needed to vent. But things got weirder after that. A few days later, she told me she was going to spend the night at a coworker's place. I asked her why, and she said she needed to talk to someone about her feelings. I didn't want to argue, so I told her, if it helps you, go ahead. In my head, I thought, maybe this is good. Maybe she'll come back feeling better, and we can work on us. The next week, she mentioned her birthday was coming up. I assumed we'd spend it together like we always did. I mean, we'd been together for 14 years. I never even thought to ask. So I brought it up casually one night, like, do you want me to make reservations somewhere, or do you want to just do something at home? She hesitated. I'm actually going out for dinner with a girl from work. I blinked. You don't want to spend your birthday with me? She kind of smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. I already made plans. It's just dinner. It hurt. I'm not going to lie. Her birthday had always been special to me, and I tried to make every year better than the last. So the fact that she'd rather spend it with someone else hit me hard. I didn't argue, though. I told myself she probably just needed a break from all the stress. The next day, something felt off. I don't know why, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't telling me the whole story. Maybe it was because I'd never even heard her mention this girl from work before. So I asked her straight up, who's the coworker you're going to dinner with? She looked annoyed. Why does it matter? It's just a friend. I wasn't convinced. I said, Is it a guy? She froze for a second. Just a second, but I noticed. Number, I told you it's a girl. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind wouldn't stop running. Call it gut instinct or paranoia, but I just knew she wasn't telling the truth. The next morning, I decided to check her phone. I know it was wrong, but I needed to know. And sure enough, she had text with someone saved as Mike from work. I saw a message about dinner that night, and it was clearly planned with him, not some girl. When she got back later that night, I confronted her. I told her I knew she had gone out with a guy, not a girl from work. She didn't even deny it. She just looked pissed that I found out. Why are you checking my phone? Don't you trust me? I snapped. Trust you? You literally lied to my face about who you were with. If you didn't do anything wrong, why lie? She yelled back that she was tired of me always being around, that I was smothering her. I just needed a night out. Is that so hard to understand? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was her birthday, and instead of spending it with me, her husband, she chose to lie and go out with another guy. I asked her point blank if something was going on between them. She rolled her eyes. Oh my God, no. It's just dinner. We fought for hours that night. By the end of it, I was so drained that I packed a bag and drove to my mom's house to cool off. I just needed to get out and think. I didn't tell her where I was going because I didn't want to keep fighting. I figured space would help. But when I came back later to grab some clothes, she was waiting for me. She started yelling, asking where I went, and accused me of giving up on the marriage. That blew my mind. I left for a few hours to cool off, and suddenly, I'm the bad guy. I told her she was the one lying, the one who didn't want to spend her birthday with me. But she twisted it back on me, saying I didn't care about her feelings. At that moment, I felt so defeated. I didn't know what to do anymore. I thought about leaving for good, but then I remembered the 14 years we'd spent together. I told myself this was just a rough patch and that we could still work through it. I was wrong. After the whole mess with her birthday dinner, things between us weren't just tense anymore, they were broken. I don't even know how to describe the feeling of living in the same house as someone you've been with for over a decade, and yet feeling like strangers. She'd come home from work, and we'd barely say a word to each other. When we did talk, it was surface-level stuff like, did you pay the electric bill? Or, do you want me to pick up groceries? That's it. It was weird because we'd always been the kind of couple that talked. I used to tell her about my day, my job, the random funny stuff that happened. She'd tell me about her coworkers, her plans for the week, but by July 2023, our conversations felt forced, like we were both just waiting for the other person to snap. One night, she came home later than usual. It wasn't crazy late, maybe 10 p.m., but still I noticed. I asked, "Where were you?" Not even trying to sound accusatory, just curious. She sighed loudly, like I'd asked her the dumbest question in the world. "I told you I was out with friends." "Which friends?" I pressed. She looked at me with that same irritated expression I was starting to get used to. "Why does it matter?" And that's when it hit me. She didn't care anymore. Not about how I felt. Not about the marriage. Not about any of it. I wasn't accusing her of cheating or lying. I just wanted to know where she was because we were married. But it was like she wanted to keep everything about her life separate now, as if I didn't deserve to know. I thought maybe I was reading too much into it. I told myself over and over again, "You're just insecure because of everything that's happened." But it wasn't just that night. It was everything. The way she was pulling away emotionally. The way she avoided being home more and more. The way she barely even looked at me anymore, like I was just some dude living in her house. I couldn't take it. I decided we needed to talk. The next morning, I asked her to sit down with me. I was nervous. Part of me didn't even want to have the conversation because I was afraid of what she'd say, but I couldn't keep ignoring it. So I sat her down and told her, "We can't keep going like this. If something's bothering you, we need to talk about it. We've been through too much to just give up now." She stared at me for a second and then said, "I feel like I don't have space anymore. I'm overwhelmed." I was stunned. Space? We were barely speaking as it was. I told her, "If you need space, that's fine. But you can't just shut me out completely. We need to work on this together." And then she hit me with something I wasn't expecting. "I think I need my own space. Like, a place to myself. I've been thinking about getting an apartment." An apartment? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I asked her, "How is that going to fix anything? You think moving out will save our marriage?" She said, "Yes, because I need time to clear my head." I didn't buy it. I told her, "If you move out, that's not fixing anything. That's running away. And you know I can't pay for this house by myself right now." She shrugged, like it wasn't her problem. "I can't live like this anymore." We fought for hours that day. I begged her to reconsider. I told her I'd go to therapy, that we could try counseling together, that we could work through it. She shut all of it down. She was so calm about it, too, like she'd already made up her mind. I told her straight up, if you move out, I'll file for divorce. She rolled her eyes and said, you're not going to do that. The next few weeks were brutal. She started actively looking for apartments, and I could feel her slipping away even more. Every day she came home, it was like living with someone I didn't know. I tried to be civil, but I couldn't hide how hurt I was. I'd catch myself staring at her, wondering, how did we get here? At one point, I asked her again, are you sure this is what you want? You're really going to leave? She said, yes, I think it's for the best. I didn't understand it. We'd been together for 14 years, and now she was acting like it was nothing, like I was nothing. A week before her move-in date, something didn't sit right with me. I started thinking about all the times she came home late, all the co-workers she hung out with, and how distant she'd been for months. My gut told me there was more going on, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. While she was at work, I did something I'm not proud of. I went through her Apple Watch. She'd left it on the kitchen counter that morning, and I knew it was connected to her phone. I told myself I was crazy, that I wouldn't find anything, but I had to know. What I found made me sick. There were texts between her and a guy, Mike from work. The messages had been going on for months. Months. I saw one where she texted him saying, I want you so bad, when can we hook up? I sat down on the kitchen floor, staring at that tiny screen, feeling like my whole world had just cracked open. When she got home that night, I confronted her. I told her I saw the messages. At first, she laughed. Actually laughed. Are you serious? You went through my stuff? I wasn't backing down. I said, you've been talking to him for months. You're planning to hook up with him. What else am I supposed to think? Her face shifted. She said, it's just a joke. You're blowing this out of proportion. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I told her, a joke? You think it's funny to talk like that with another guy? That's when she snapped and admitted it. Well, maybe if you actually gave me attention, I wouldn't have to look somewhere else. That was it. I didn't even know what to say. For months, I'd been trying to fix things, and now I realized she didn't care. She'd already checked out. She moved out in August 2023, and I let her go. When August 2023 rolled around, I felt like I was stuck watching my own life fall apart in slow motion. My wife had found an apartment, signed the lease, and was officially moving out. I wish I could tell you I fought harder to stop her, but the truth is I was exhausted, mentally and emotionally. At some point, you just hit a wall, you know? That last week before she moved out was brutal. The tension in the house was unbearable. We weren't really talking anymore unless it was something necessary, like coordinating when the movers were coming, or what furniture she planned on taking. I didn't argue about who got what because, honestly, I didn't care. I just wanted it to be over. The day she packed up, it felt surreal. I watched as boxes of her things disappeared from the house we'd built together over the last decade. She was surprisingly calm through the whole thing, which somehow made it worse. There was no crying, no reminiscing, no sign that this was difficult for her. It was like I didn't even exist to her anymore. At one point, I asked her, why are you doing this? Can you just explain it to me one more time? She sighed like I was the one being unreasonable. I told you already, I need my space. I need to figure things out for myself. I tried to press her. Figure out what? Are you planning to come back? She didn't answer. Instead, she grabbed another box and carried it out to her car. That silence told me everything I needed to know. I don't know why I did it, but I helped her move some of the heavier stuff. It felt weird helping her leave me, but part of me thought maybe this would give me closure. Maybe seeing her walk away with her own 2 feet would help me finally accept it. Spoiler, it didn't. At the apartment complex, I carried the last box up to her unit, set it down, and looked around. The place was nice, small but modern. Clean white walls, big windows, and empty. It hit me then that she was excited for this. While I was dreading her leaving, she had been looking forward to it. Before I left, I asked her, are you happy now? She gave me a look I'll never forget. Not sad, not angry, just cold. I don't know yet. I nodded and walked out. That first night without her was one of the loneliest I've ever had. I sat in our quiet house and realized how empty it felt without her. All her stuff was gone, and her side of the closet was bare. The house felt less like a home, and more like a reminder of everything that had fallen apart. I couldn't sleep that night. I just laid there staring at the ceiling, replaying the last few months in my head. The accident, the surgery, the fights, the texts, everything. I kept asking myself, what did I do wrong? Was I not enough for her? Could I have done something to stop this? The next morning, I tried to get back to my routine, but nothing felt the same. I had physical therapy scheduled, so I forced myself to get up and go. The pain in my back wasn't getting better, and the stress of everything made it worse. My therapist noticed. She asked how I was doing, and I told her the truth. Not great. She listened while I told her what was happening, and for the first time in months, someone actually said what I needed to hear. You can't carry all the blame for this. You didn't ask to get hurt. You didn't ask for her to pull away. Hearing that didn't fix anything, but it helped me start thinking differently. I'd spent so long beating myself up about everything, feeling like I was broken, like it was all my fault, but maybe it wasn't. 2 weeks after she moved out, I found out something that changed everything. I got a text from a mutual friend asking how I was doing, and casually, they mentioned, I saw her name at that bar downtown last night. She was with some guy. They looked pretty cozy. I just sat there staring at my phone. I didn't want to believe it, but deep down, I already knew. She wasn't looking for space or time to think. She had someone else waiting in the wings the whole time. The pieces started falling into place. Her late nights, her sudden need for friends, the text with Mike. She'd been planning this for months. While I was still trying to figure out how to fix us, she'd already moved on. I spent the rest of that day in a haze. I didn't call her, didn't text her. What was the point? She'd made her choice. The next morning, I called a lawyer and told them I wanted to file for divorce. When I finally told her a few days later, her response was unbelievable. She smirked and said, "You're just bluffing." Do I look like I'm bluffing? I shot back. She didn't say anything after that. I don't know if she thought I'd cave or beg her to come back, but I didn't. I'd spent months feeling like a burden, like I wasn't enough, but seeing how little she cared made me realize something. I deserved better. We didn't have kids, so the divorce process moved quickly. We didn't have much to fight over. She took her stuff, and I kept mine. By mid-September, all the paperwork was in motion. In the weeks leading up to the final signing, she barely spoke to me. If she needed something, she'd text me like I was her landlord, not her husband. Can you forward me that utility bill? Did you cancel the internet? That's it. One day, she called me out of the blue and asked for a favor. She'd totaled her car in an accident. Ironic, I know. And wanted to borrow my car to get to work. I told her no. Then she said, "Well, can you drive me to work then?" I couldn't believe the nerve. "You're not my problem anymore," I told her, and I meant it. She hung up on me, and that was the last real conversation we had. By the time the divorce was finalized in December 2023, I didn't feel relieved. I just felt numb. I thought about all the years we'd spent together, 14 years of memories, good and bad, and it hit me that the person I thought I knew was gone. Or maybe she was never who I thought she was to begin with. She moved on like I never existed. I stopped hearing from her altogether. She didn't even bother to update her address, so her mail kept coming to my house. At first, I'd text her to come pick it up, but she ignored me. Eventually, I started writing "Return to Sender" and putting it back in the mailbox. It sounds petty, I know, but I needed to move on too. By September 2023, the divorce process was officially in motion, and I had no more fight left in me. If you've ever been through something like this, you know what I mean. It's not dramatic or explosive by that point. It's just draining, like someone pulled the plug and all your energy, your love, your hope just leaks out until there's nothing left. She wasn't angry. I wasn't angry. It was almost mechanical. We'd meet briefly to sign paperwork, talk about splitting up utilities, and discuss who was keeping what. Most of the communication happened over text. It was like we were business partners dissolving a contract instead of two people who'd spent over a decade building a life together. The whole who gets what discussion didn't take long. She packed her things when she moved out. Clothes, personal stuff, and whatever furniture she wanted for her apartment. I didn't argue. Honestly, I didn't want anything that reminded me of her. The couch we used to cuddle on? Take it. The kitchen table where we had dinners? Don't care. It sounds dramatic, but every object felt tainted. Like keeping those things would just drag the ghost of our relationship around with me. When it came to the house, I decided to stay. I know some people sell the house in a divorce to get a fresh start, but I couldn't. I've always been the type who hates change, and leaving my home on top of everything else was more than I could handle. I couldn't work, so I applied for financial hardship and figured I'd hang on as long as I could. A month after we filed, I heard through the grapevine that she was already dating someone, probably the same guy I'd found in her texts. I didn't even feel angry. I felt numb. Like, of course she was moving on. That's who she was now. The version of her that cared about me, supported me, and treated our marriage like it mattered, she was gone. The hardest part of those months wasn't the divorce paperwork or hearing about her new life. It was the silence. After 14 years of having someone there, someone to talk to, even just sit with, it was jarring to wake up in an empty house. The quiet was almost suffocating. I started to notice how little I was taking care of myself. I'd skip meals without realizing it. I stopped doing things I used to enjoy, like tinkering with my tools or watching sports. I'd just sit on the couch staring at my phone, scrolling through pointless stuff for hours because I didn't know what else to do. One day, my mom came over to drop off some food. She looked around the house, saw how messy it had gotten, and said, "You can't keep living like this. You have to pick yourself up." I didn't snap at her because I knew she was right, but at the same time, I wanted to say, how? How do I start over after everything I've been through? Between the accident, my injuries, losing my marriage, and feeling like a shell of who I used to be, I didn't know where to begin. The turning point came in October 2023. That's when I got a phone call from her. It was out of the blue, and when I saw her name on my screen, my stomach dropped. I didn't know if I should answer or ignore it, but curiosity got the best of me. "Hello?" "Hey," she said flatly. "No. How are you?" No small talk. She got straight to the point. "I need to borrow your car." I couldn't believe it. "What?" She explained she'd been in a car accident. Her car was totaled, and she needed a way to get to work. I asked if she was okay, and she shrugged it off like it was nothing. "I didn't go to the hospital. I'm fine." Then she said, "Can I borrow your car for a while?" I almost laughed. After everything we'd been through, this is what she called me for? Told her, "No, that's not happening." She didn't like that. "Well, can you drive me to work then?" "No," I said again, this time firmer. "I have physical therapy appointments and doctor visits. I can't help you." Her tone shifted. "That's not my problem." That's when I snapped. "You're right. It's not. And you're not my problem anymore either." She hung up on me and I sat there staring at the screen for a minute. For the first time, I felt free. Like I finally realized I didn't owe her anything. Not my time, not my car, not my energy. She made her choices and now she had to live with them. From that day forward, I stopped caring about her. Not in a bitter, angry way, just in a "this is over" way. I stopped checking her social media. I stopped asking mutual friends about her. I focused on myself instead. In the weeks leading up to the divorce being finalized in December, I started pulling myself together. I still had pain from my back injuries, but I pushed myself to be more active. I started small, taking short walks outside, trying to fix up little things around the house that had been neglected. It wasn't much, but it was something. The final court date came, and we didn't say much to each other. She looked different, like a stranger wearing my wife's face. I handed over the last of the paperwork. The judge signed off on everything, and just like that, we were no longer husband and wife. When we left the courthouse, she looked at me and said, "Good luck." I didn't say anything back. I just walked to my car and drove home. I thought I'd feel relief when it was finally over, but all I felt was empty. It's strange, really. You spend years building something with someone, and then one day, a few signatures on a piece of paper make it like it never happened. The weeks after that were quiet but different. The silence in my house didn't feel suffocating anymore. It felt peaceful. I stopped thinking about what she was doing or who she was with. I started focusing on my health, my pain management, and what I wanted my future to look like. I guess in a weird way, I have her to thank for that. By the time the new year rolled around, I realized that I'd been stuck in survival mode for months. My divorce was finalized in December 2023, and as much as I tried to mentally prepare myself for that day, it still hit me like a punch to the gut. The weirdest part? It wasn't even sadness anymore. It was just emptiness. Like the life I thought I'd have was just gone, and I didn't know what came next. The weeks after the divorce were slow, but they gave me something I didn't expect: clarity. Without her in the picture, I didn't feel like I was walking on eggshells in my own home anymore. The quiet stopped feeling lonely, and I started finding peace in it. I'd sit in my living room, coffee in hand, just listening to the hum of the heater and the occasional sound of cars passing by outside. It sounds lame, I know, but it was the first time in months I felt calm. I made it my mission to focus on myself, something I hadn't done in years. Between the back pain, the marriage falling apart, and my inability to work, I'd completely lost myself. I started setting small goals. First, I forced myself to get into a basic routine: wake up at 7 a.m., shower, eat breakfast, and get outside for a short walk every morning. My physical therapy appointments were still ongoing, and I made sure I never missed one. I also worked on the house. It was little stuff at first, like cleaning up the kitchen or organizing the garage, but every small task felt like a win. The house didn't feel so heavy anymore. It started to feel like mine again. I moved her leftover things to the basement and eventually threw out or donated the stuff I knew she'd never come back for. It was my way of reclaiming my space. By January 2024, my back pain started to improve, at least a little. I had a procedure where the doctor numbed the nerves in my lower back to help me manage the pain. For the first time in over a year, I wasn't constantly wincing with every step I took. I still wasn't 100%, but I started feeling hopeful that I might get back to normal someday, or at least close to it.
When my mother-in-law whispered something in my husband's ear, his face twisted with anger. Without warning, he yanked my hair and landed a hard punch to my face. I collapsed, dazed and terrified. Desperate for help, I called the police. But when they arrived, I was horrified to find that the officer was a friend of my husband. My heart sank as he dismissed my pleas, claiming I had no proof. With my immediate safety compromised and feeling utterly alone, I knew I needed a new plan. And that's when I decided to take matters into my own hands. I still remember the first day I brought my daughter, Lily, home from the hospital. The joy was overwhelming, but so was the exhaustion. I'm Isabella, 30 years old, trying to adjust to the whirlwind of motherhood. The first few weeks were a blur of sleepless nights, endless feedings, and trying to keep up with the chaos that had taken over our home in Austin, Texas. The house was often a mess, with laundry piling up and the kitchen in a constant state of disarray. David, my husband, was working long hours, and I felt like I was barely keeping my head above water. One particularly stressful afternoon, as I struggled to soothe Lily's cries, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. I looked around at the untidy residence, feeling a pang of shame. I hadn't had a chance to clean up, and the sight of the dirty kitchen only added to my stress. When I opened the door, there stood Margaret, David's mother. She was a force to be reckoned with, her presence commanding attention the moment she arrived. "Well, look at this," Margaret said, stepping inside with a critical eye. "I see things haven't improved much since the last time I visited." I tried to muster a smile, but it felt strained. "Hi, Margaret. I'm just a bit overwhelmed with everything right now." Margaret's gaze swept over the living room, taking in the scattered toys and the pile of dishes in the kitchen. "Overwhelmed? It looks more like you've given up. Is this really how you plan to raise my granddaughter?" Her words stung, but I tried to stay calm. "I'm doing my best. It's just been a lot to handle." Margaret's disapproval was palpable. She walked into the kitchen and raised an eyebrow at the state of it. "This place is a mess. How can you expect to manage anything if you can't even keep the house clean?" I felt my cheeks flush with humiliation. David's work schedule left me to handle everything on my own, and while I was trying, it was clear it wasn't enough for Margaret. The front door opened, and David walked in, his face lighting up when he saw his mother.
"Mom."
"What a surprise. I didn't know you were coming by." Margaret immediately seized the opportunity. "David, just look at this. Your wife can't even manage to keep the house in order. It's like she's completely lost control." David's face fell as he glanced around, taking in the messy state of our home. "Isabella, we need to talk about this. I know things are tough, but you have to prioritize better." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. "David, I'm trying. It's not as easy as it looks." Margaret, ever the instigator, chimed in. "Being a mother is about more than just caring for the baby. It's about responsibility and managing your household." David's gaze shifted between his mother and me, his expression conflicted. "Mom, maybe we should try to help her understand what's at stake here." "Help her understand?" Margaret's voice grew sharper. "She needs to learn discipline. She's not living up to our family standards." The tension in the room was palpable. David, who usually stood by me, was now looking at me with a mixture of frustration and confusion. "Sophie, you need to get your act together. This isn't acceptable." Before I could respond, Margaret stepped closer to David, whispering something in his ear. David's face hardened, and he looked back at me with an unreadable expression. "Maybe you're right," he said reluctantly. "Maybe you need to learn the hard way." I felt my heart drop as David moved toward me. In a shocking burst of anger, he grabbed my hair and yanked it painfully. Before I could react, he threw a hard punch to my face. The force of it sent me reeling, and I staggered back, clutching my cheek as tears streamed down my face. I could barely process what had just happened. The pain was sharp, but the sense of betrayal was even worse. Lily, who had been quiet during the confrontation, began to cry, adding to my overwhelming distress. Desperation set in, and I reached for my phone, dialing 911 with trembling hands. When the police officer arrived, I hoped for some relief. But my heart sank when I realized he was an old friend of David's. His demeanor was calm and dismissive as he listened to my report. "I'm afraid I can't do much without solid evidence," he said, glancing at David. "There's not enough here to act on." I was stunned. The officer, who should have been my ally, was siding with David. But he hit me. "Can't you do anything?" The officer shook his head. "Without clear proof, there's nothing I can do. Maybe next time, try to gather more evidence before calling us." He left, leaving me feeling even more isolated. I looked at David, who had a cold, indifferent look on his face. Margaret stood beside him, her expression one of smug satisfaction. The sense of betrayal from both David and the officer left me feeling utterly alone. As the door closed behind the officer, I sank to the floor, cradling Lily in my arms. The house that was supposed to be my home now felt like a prison. The physical pain from the punch was nothing compared to the emotional turmoil I was experiencing. This was the moment when I realized that my life had become something I couldn't tolerate. I knew I needed to make a change, but the road ahead seemed daunting. David's behavior, under Margaret's influence, had crossed a line that could never be undone. I needed to find a way out, not just for myself, but for my daughter as well. In the midst of the chaos and despair, I made a silent vow to myself. I would find a way to escape this nightmare and build a life where Lily and I could be safe and happy. This was only the beginning of a journey that would test my strength and resilience in ways I never imagined. The days that followed the attack were some of the hardest I had ever faced. I was deeply shaken, but the physical and emotional pain from David's violence were overshadowed by a stronger feeling, determination. I knew I had to get out. I had to protect Lily and find a way to escape the toxic environment David and Margaret had created. But how? It wasn't until a few days later that I found a glimmer of hope. Rachel, my old friend from college, had always been someone I could rely on. I reached out to her, hoping she could offer guidance. I was hesitant at first, not wanting to burden her with my problems, but desperation gave me the courage to call. "Rachel, it's Isabella. I need your help," I said, my voice trembling as I spoke into the phone. "Things have gotten really bad. David, he hit me. The police didn't help, and I'm afraid to stay here any longer." Rachel's response was immediate and filled with concern. "Isabella, I'm so sorry you're going through this. I'm an investigator now. I can help you. Let's meet and talk about what you need." We arranged to meet at a coffee shop. When I walked in, Rachel was already there, looking as composed as ever. I sat down across from her, feeling a mix of relief and anxiety. "So, what's the plan?" Rachel asked, her eyes steady and focused. I took a deep breath. "I need to leave David, but I can't do it without proof of what's happening. I need to gather evidence to show that his behavior is abusive and that Margaret's control over him is a big part of it." Rachel nodded. "We'll need to document everything. Do you have any recordings, messages, or evidence of the abuse?" I shook my head. "I don't, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes." Rachel's face softened with sympathy. "We'll start by gathering as much evidence as we can. We'll need to document your interactions with David and Margaret, and if you can, try to record any instances of abuse or manipulation." Over the next few weeks, Rachel and I worked tirelessly. Rachel showed me how to use a hidden recording app on my phone to capture conversations and incidents. I recorded phone calls, text messages, and even began documenting my daily interactions with David and Margaret. I was careful not to draw their suspicion while doing this, which was challenging given how closely they were monitoring me. One day, Margaret called me while David was at work. I answered the phone, trying to keep my voice steady. "Hello, Margaret." "Isabella," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "David told me you've been causing trouble. I've been very patient, but it's clear you need to be reminded of your place." I recorded the entire conversation, capturing her manipulative tone and the way she spoke about David and me. It was disturbing to hear her undermine my efforts as a mother and wife, but it was crucial evidence. Rachel and I also planned for my eventual departure. We mapped out a strategy to leave when David was at work, ensuring that he wouldn't be around to stop me. Rachel helped me organize a safe place to stay temporarily, making sure Lily and I would have somewhere secure to go once we left. One night, as I lay in bed, I felt a mix of anxiety and determination. The decision to leave was not just about escaping David's physical abuse, but about breaking free from the suffocating control Margaret had over our lives. I knew that this step would be dangerous and challenging, but I had to do it for Lily's sake. The day of our planned departure came, and I felt a knot of fear and excitement in my stomach. David was supposed to be at work, and Rachel had agreed to meet me at the house to help with the move. I spent the morning packing a few essentials, trying to stay calm and focused. As I was about to leave, I received a text from Rachel. "I'm outside. Are you ready?" My heart raced as I quickly gathered Lily and our things. I took one last look at the house that had been both a home and a prison. The clutter, the mess, it all symbolized the chaos and control that had plagued our lives. With a deep breath, I stepped out of the door, locking it behind me. Rachel and I loaded everything into her car and drove to her house. The journey was quiet, but filled with unspoken relief. I knew that this was the beginning of a new chapter, but I also knew that there was still a long way to go. The road ahead was uncertain, but I felt a glimmer of hope for the first time in a long while. Once we arrived at Rachel's house, I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me. We unloaded our things and settled in. Rachel offered comfort and support, reminding me that this was just the first step in our plan. In the days that followed, Rachel and I focused on collecting more evidence and preparing for the next phase. We knew that exposing David and Margaret's abuse would be crucial for our case. I was determined to see this through, no matter how challenging it might be. Rachel's support was invaluable, and her expertise as an investigator was a lifeline during this turbulent time. Together, we prepared for the crucial task of building a solid case against David and Margaret, knowing that our efforts were not clear, detailed evidence to present. We also focused on documenting every instance of David's abusive behavior. Rachel advised me to reach out to any family members or friends who might have witnessed Margaret's controlling ways or had seen David's violent tendencies. One of David's cousins, who had always been sympathetic towards me, agreed to speak up. She provided a written statement detailing her observations of David's aggressive behavior and Margaret's interference in our marriage. With the evidence compiled, Rachel and I began to organize our presentation. We knew that simply having evidence wasn't enough. We needed to present it in a way that would be convincing and comprehensive. We categorized the materials into several key areas: abuse incidents, manipulation by Margaret, and David's erratic behavior. Rachel helped me prepare a detailed report, summarizing each piece of evidence and its significance. We included timestamps and context for the recordings, ensuring that everything was as clear and precise as possible. It was a daunting task, but it was necessary to build a strong case. One day, Rachel and I met with a lawyer who specialized in domestic abuse cases. She reviewed our evidence and gave us crucial advice on how to proceed. "You have a solid case," she said, flipping through the documents and listening to the recordings. "But we need to ensure that everything is presented clearly. I'll help you file a restraining order and press charges." Her words were a beacon of hope. Knowing that we had legal support to back us up was incredibly reassuring. We worked with her to prepare the necessary paperwork and ensure that all our evidence was in order. The day of the court hearing arrived, and my nerves were frayed. Rachel and I walked into the courthouse, carrying the weight of our efforts and the hope for justice. The atmosphere was tense, and I could feel the gravity of the situation pressing down on me. Rachel stayed by my side, providing support and encouragement as we awaited our turn. When it was finally time to present our case, I felt a surge of adrenaline and fear. The evidence was overwhelming, and Rachel's legal expertise guided us through the process. We played the recordings, presented the documents, and shared the testimonies from David's cousin and other witnesses. The courtroom was quiet as the evidence unfolded. I could see the judge's reaction as he listened to the recordings and reviewed the evidence. It was a nerve-wracking experience, but I knew that this was the culmination of all our hard work. As the hearing concluded, the judge's decision was imminent. Rachel and I waited anxiously for the verdict. It was a tense time, but I was hopeful that the evidence would be enough to secure a positive outcome. The days following the hearing were filled with anticipation. Finally, we received the news we had been waiting for. The judge had ruled in our favor. David and Margaret would face legal consequences for their actions. It was a significant victory, but I knew that there was still much work to be done. Rachel and I continued to work on securing my new apartment and finalizing our plans. The legal victory was just one step in our journey toward rebuilding a safe and independent life. With the support of Rachel and the legal system, I felt a renewed sense of hope and determination. In reflecting on these events, I realized that the fight for justice had been a transformative experience. It had tested my strength, resilience, and resolve. But with each step forward, I grew more confident in my ability to overcome the challenges that had once seemed insurmountable. With the court ruling in our favor, Rachel and I felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. The evidence we had so painstakingly gathered had paid off, but the final step, seeing David and Margaret held accountable, was still ahead of us. The time had come to involve the authorities and ensure that justice was served. Rachel and I worked closely with our lawyer to coordinate with the police. We compiled a comprehensive dossier of evidence, including recordings, texts, and witness statements, and handed it over to the authorities. Rachel's expertise and my first-hand accounts made our case as robust as possible. On the day of the arrest, my heart raced with a mixture of fear and hope. David and Margaret were still unaware of what was coming, and I was nervous about how they would react. Rachel stayed by my side, providing support and helping me stay focused. The police arrived at David and Margaret's house in the afternoon. I watched from a distance, my emotions a tangled mess of anxiety and anticipation. Rachel had advised me to stay away from the scene for my safety and to avoid any direct confrontation. From what I could see, the officers were taking their time as they approached the house. It was an agonizing wait. Finally, after what felt like hours, Rachel received a call from one of the officers. David and Margaret had been arrested. The weight of the news was almost overwhelming. The long, painful journey to this point had finally reached its climax, and the people who had tormented me were now facing consequences for their actions. That evening, as the sun set over Austin, I felt a profound sense of closure. It wasn't just about the legal victory, it was about reclaiming my life and asserting my right to safety and respect. With David and Margaret facing charges, I could finally start to think about my future without the shadow of their abuse looming over me. In the days that followed, I worked on settling into my new apartment with my daughter. The move was physically and emotionally exhausting, but it also symbolized a new beginning. I took great care in setting up our home to be a peaceful and nurturing environment for my daughter. It was important for me to create a space where we could heal and start anew. Rachel continued to be a steadfast friend and supporter. She helped me navigate the complexities of my new life and ensured that I had access to the resources and support I needed. Her presence was a constant reminder of the strength that had carried me through this ordeal. The legal process continued, and I stayed updated on the proceedings. David and Margaret's court dates were set, and I was prepared to testify if necessary. The legal system would hold them accountable for their abusive behavior, and I was determined to see it through. As I looked back on the journey, I was struck by the incredible support I had received from Rachel and the legal system. Their help had been instrumental in breaking free from the cycle of abuse and beginning a new chapter in my life. It was a reminder of the importance of resilience, courage, and seeking support when facing adversity. The day David and Margaret were officially charged was a bittersweet moment. I felt a sense of justice being served, but it was tempered by the knowledge that the impact of their actions would linger. Nonetheless, the legal consequences they faced were a crucial step in holding them accountable and ensuring that they could no longer inflict harm on anyone else. As I settled into my new life, I reflected on the strength it took to confront and overcome such a deeply painful situation. The support of friends, the legal victories, and my own determination had all played a vital role in helping me rebuild my life. I was now in a place where I could focus on creating a positive and loving environment for my daughter, free from the shadow of abuse and manipulation. In the end, my journey was a testament to the power of resilience and the importance of standing up against abuse. With each day that passed, I felt stronger and more capable of facing the future with hope and confidence. On my wedding day, when I stopped my stepmom from joining the family photo, she reacted in the most shocking way. She tore my wedding dress in front of all the guests and shouted, "Look at her. Her skin was burned, and she hid it with plastic surgery." Everyone was stunned. My fiancé, influenced by the chaos, canceled the wedding and left the venue. My controlling father remained silent, merely watching the drama unfold. I cried for help, but no one stood by me. My stepmom laughed triumphantly, satisfied that her plan had worked. However, little did she know, I had a secret revenge plan, and by the very next day, she was on her knees. My name is Nancy Carter, and I'd like to tell you a story, my story. It's not one of fairy tales or perfect endings, but one of betrayal, resilience, and finding strength when the world feels like it's falling apart. I grew up with my dad, Robert. He's a kind man, but ever since my mom passed away when I was young, he's struggled to find his footing. A few years after her death, he remarried Sophia, my stepmother. At first, I wanted to give her a chance, to believe she could bring something good into our lives. But Sophia wasn't that kind of woman. She was manipulative, jealous, and petty. My success, my independence, it all seemed to bother her. She would throw snide remarks at me, undermine me whenever she could, and often made my dad feel like I was the problem. Still, I tried to stay strong. I built a career I was proud of as a businesswoman. Every achievement I earned felt like a small victory against the constant negativity Sophia brought into my life. But there was one thing I kept private, something I wasn't ready to share with anyone. I had undergone plastic surgery to remove a few minor skin spots. It was a deeply personal decision, and I didn't want anyone, especially Sophia, to know. I knew how she would twist it, turning something so simple into ammunition against me. My wedding day should have been the happiest day of my life. I was marrying Jake Miller, the man I loved, and I had dreams of starting a new chapter with him. Jake was everything I'd hoped for, kind, supportive, and grounded. His parents, however, were a bit different. They cared a lot about appearances and what other people thought. Still, I was hopeful that love would outweigh everything else. As I was getting ready that morning, Sophia made her way to the bridal suite. She had this smug look on her face, like she was waiting for an opportunity to strike. When it came time for family photos, she insisted on being in one of them. Normally, I might have let it slide, but I was tired of always giving in to her. I said no. I didn't want her toxic energy in what was supposed to be a happy memory. That's when everything spiraled out of control. Sophia's voice cut through the room, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Nancy doesn't want me in the photo because she's hiding something," she said, her tone sharp and accusing. My heart sank as she continued, louder this time. "You all should know, her perfect skin isn't real. She had plastic surgery because her skin was burned, and she's been hiding it." The room fell silent, and I felt the weight of every eye on me. My mind raced as I tried to process what she'd just done, but she wasn't finished. She stormed toward me and, before I could react, grabbed the fabric of my wedding dress and yanked it. The sound of the fabric tearing echoed in the room, and I froze as the dress fell apart, exposing the scars from my surgery. Gasps filled the air, and I felt like the ground had disappeared beneath me. "See?" Sophia shouted, her voice dripping with triumph. "She's been hiding this from everyone." I couldn't breathe. The humiliation was suffocating, and I couldn't even look at Jake. My mind screamed for him to defend me, to do something, but he didn't. His parents were the first to react. His mother whispered something to him, and before I knew it, he was walking away with them, leaving me alone in the middle of the chaos. "The wedding is off," Jake's father declared loudly enough for everyone to hear. My world shattered in that moment. I turned to my dad, desperate for support, for him to say something, anything. But he just stood there, his eyes avoiding mine, silent as Sophia smirked in the background. She had planned this, I realized. She wanted this moment, and she had succeeded. Tears blurred my vision as I stumbled out of the room. The whispers, the shocked faces, the pitying glances, they all felt like knives stabbing into me. I collapsed in a quiet corner of the venue, my heart breaking into pieces. How could this have happened? How could someone be so cruel? As I sat there, trying to catch my breath, I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Lily, my cousin. She knelt beside me, her eyes filled with empathy and determination. "Nancy, this isn't the end," she said softly. "You don't deserve this. We're going to get through it." Her words sparked something in me, a faint glimmer of resolve. But it wasn't enough to drown out Sophia's laughter in the distance. She had won this battle, but deep down, I knew the war wasn't over. I wiped my tears, the humiliation still raw, but I promised myself one thing in that moment. I wasn't going to let her get away with it. Whatever it took, I would make her pay for what she had done. Little did I know, the journey ahead would uncover secrets far darker than I could have imagined. I didn't leave my house for days after the wedding. The humiliation, the betrayal, it all replayed in my mind like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sophia tearing my dress, Jake walking away, and the pitiful looks of the guests. It wasn't just the pain of being abandoned at the altar, it was the feeling of being exposed, reduced to nothing by someone who had made it her mission to ruin me. Lily stayed with me through it all. She didn't let me sink completely into despair, even when I wanted to. One evening, as I sat on the couch staring blankly at the wall, she placed a mug of tea in my hands and sat beside me. "Nancy," she said firmly, her voice breaking through the fog of my thoughts. "You can't let her win. She's been trying to tear you down for years, and this, what she did at the wedding, this was her ultimate move. If you give up now, she gets everything she wanted." I looked at her, my voice barely above a whisper. "What am I supposed to do, Lily? She destroyed my life. Jake is gone. His parents hate me. Everyone at that wedding saw everything. How do I come back from that?" She leaned in, her eyes full of determination. "You fight back. Sophia's not some invincible force. She's just a bitter, cruel woman. And I bet if we dig deep enough, we'll find out that she's hiding something too. You're not the only one with secrets." Her words planted a seed in my mind. Sophia had always been calculated, always a step ahead. But what if I could turn the tables? What if I could expose her for who she really was? That night, I made the decision. I wasn't going to let Sophia's cruelty define my life. I contacted a private investigator, Ryan Blake, the next day. I told him everything, how Sophia had tormented me for years, how she had humiliated me at my wedding, and how I needed to know the truth about her. Ryan listened carefully, his expression serious. "I'll look into it," he said, his voice steady. "People like her often have skeletons in their closet. It's just a matter of finding them." The next few weeks felt like an eternity. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart raced, hoping it was Ryan with news. In the meantime, I tried to pick up the pieces of my life. My dad, still under Sophia's thumb, avoided me. Jake didn't call, and I didn't have the courage to reach out to him. Then one evening, Ryan called. His voice was calm, but carried an edge of urgency. "Nancy, I think you're going to want to hear this in person," he said. "Can you meet me tomorrow?" The next day, I sat across from Ryan in his small office, my hands trembling slightly as I waited for him to speak. He placed a folder on the desk between us and slid it toward me. "Sophia has been involved in illegal activities," he began. "Specifically, she's been selling harmful drugs through an underground network. It's not just a minor operation. These drugs have caused significant harm to people. And she's been doing it for years." I stared at him, my mind struggling to process what I was hearing. "Illegal drugs?" I repeated, my voice shaking. He nodded. "She's clever about it. Most of her dealings are done through intermediaries, but I've gathered enough evidence to connect her directly to the operation. Bank records, phone logs, even testimonies from people who've dealt with her. It's all in that folder. I opened the folder and began flipping through the documents. Each piece of evidence felt like a puzzle piece falling into place, revealing a picture of a woman far more dangerous than I had imagined. "Does my dad know about this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Ryan shook his head. "From what I can tell, he's completely in the dark. She's been careful to keep her business separate from him." The anger that had been simmering inside me since the wedding began to boil over. This wasn't just about what Sophia had done to me. This was about what she had done to countless others, the lies she had built her life on, and the people she had hurt along the way. "I want to take her down," I said, my voice steady with determination. "I want to make sure she pays for everything she's done." Ryan nodded. "With this evidence, you have a strong case. You'll need a good lawyer, though. Someone who can handle something this big." I contacted Sarah Davis, a lawyer known for her no-nonsense attitude and sharp legal mind. When I explained the situation, she agreed to help without hesitation. "People like Sophia thrive because no one stands up to them," Sarah said during our first meeting. "But we're going to change that. She's not going to get away with this." The next steps were daunting. Filing a case, preparing for the inevitable backlash. It felt like I was gearing up for war. But for the first time since the wedding, I felt a spark of hope. Sophia had spent years trying to break me, but now I had the power to fight back. As I left Sarah's office that day, I couldn't help but smile. Sophia had no idea what was coming, but soon, the truth would catch up with her. And this time, I wasn't going to back down. As the case against Sophia began to take shape, I could feel the tension building. Every step felt like a mix of progress and dread, but I knew there was no turning back. Sarah was relentless in her work, and Ryan continued to uncover more about Sophia's hidden dealings. What started as a tangled web of deceit was now becoming clear and undeniable. My first challenge was telling my father. Despite everything, he was still my dad, and I didn't want him blindsided when the truth came out. One evening, I invited him over to my apartment. He looked uneasy, avoiding eye contact, and I could tell Sophia had already started spinning her narrative. "Nancy," he began, his voice hesitant, "Sophia said you're trying to cause trouble for the family. I know things have been difficult, but..." I cut him off. "Dad, stop. I need you to listen to me. This isn't about family drama. It's about the truth." I slid the folder Ryan had prepared across the table to him. "You need to see this." As he flipped through the pages, his face paled. His hands shook slightly as he read through the evidence of Sophia's involvement in the illegal drug trade. When he finally looked up at me, his eyes were filled with disbelief. This can't be true," he whispered. "She wouldn't." "She would," I said firmly. "And she has. For years, Dad. She's been lying to you, to everyone. She's not the person you think she is." He sat back in his chair, his shoulders slumping as the weight of the truth settled on him. "I didn't see it," he murmured. "All this time, I thought." His voice trailed off. "I need you to stand with me," I said, leaning forward. "This isn't just about what she's done to me. It's about everything she's done to hurt people, to destroy lives. We can't let her get away with this." He nodded slowly, the fight draining from his expression. "You're right. I've let her control me for too long. I'll support you, Nancy. Whatever you need." For the first time in years, I felt a flicker of connection with my dad. It wasn't enough to erase the past, but it was a start. The court date came faster than I expected. Walking into that courthouse felt like stepping into a battlefield. Sophia was there, of course, with her sharp suit and an expression that oozed confidence. But I noticed something different. There was a crack in her facade, a flicker of unease in her eyes. She knew the walls were closing in. Sarah was brilliant in the courtroom, presenting the evidence with precision and clarity. Ryan's findings were ironclad, and the testimonies from people Sophia had hurt painted a damning picture. As the days went on, Sophia's confidence began to waver. Her lawyer scrambled to counter the evidence, but it was clear they were fighting a losing battle. When the verdict was finally announced, the room was silent. The judge's words were firm and final. Sophia was guilty on all counts. She would face prison time for her crimes. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. It was over. She was finally going to pay for everything she had done. But the moment wasn't just about her. It was about me reclaiming my life. As Sophia was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, she turned to me, her eyes filled with fury. "You think you've won?" she hissed. "This isn't over." I didn't flinch. "It is for you," I said calmly. For the first time, I felt free from her shadow. After the trial, my dad came to me, his face lined with regret. "Nancy, I'm so sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "I should have seen what she was doing. I should have stood up for you sooner." I nodded, tears stinging my eyes.
Thank you, Dad.
That means more than, you know. The aftermath of the trial brought a whirlwind of emotions. I heard whispers of Sophia's business associates facing similar investigations, and I knew the ripple effect of her actions was only beginning. My dad filed for divorce, cutting ties with her completely. He was trying to rebuild his life, and so was I. But the most unexpected moment came a few weeks later when Jake and his parents showed up at my door. My first instinct was to slam it in their faces, but something in Jake's eyes stopped me. He looked ashamed, broken in a way I hadn't seen before. "Nancy," he began, his voice trembling, "I was wrong. We were all wrong. I let my parents' judgment cloud my own, and I let Sophia manipulate me. I'm so sorry for what I did to you." His parents echoed his apology, admitting their mistake in believing Sophia's lies. For a long moment, I didn't know what to say. I wanted to scream, to tell them they didn't deserve a second chance. But deep down, I knew forgiveness wasn't about them. It was about me. "I need time," I said finally. "If you're serious about making things right, it's going to take more than words." Jake nodded, his eyes filled with determination. "I'll do whatever it takes." It wasn't an easy decision, but it was the beginning of something new. My life was finally moving forward, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was in control. As I sat in my apartment, reflecting on everything that had happened, I realized just how much my life had changed. In a matter of months, I had gone from a woman humiliated and broken on her wedding day to someone who had stood up against a lifetime of manipulation and cruelty. But my journey wasn't over yet. After Sophia's conviction and my father's decision to divorce her, there was a sense of closure. The weight of her toxic influence had been lifted, not just from my life but from my father's as well. For the first time in years, I saw him as the man he used to be, kind, thoughtful, and determined to make things right. He visited me often, bringing me flowers or cooking meals as a way to apologize for the years he had stood by silently while Sophia tore me down. One evening, over dinner, he looked at me and said, "Nancy, I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about standing up for what's right. I want you to know I'm proud of you. You've shown more courage than I ever did, and I'll never stop trying to make up for the past." His words brought tears to my eyes.
Thank you, Dad, I said softly.
That means everything to me. Meanwhile, Jake had been working hard to prove he deserved a second chance. He wrote me letters, apologizing again and again for abandoning me when I needed him most. He showed up at my workplace with small, thoughtful gifts, nothing extravagant, just reminders that he was thinking of me. And his parents, once so cold and judgmental, were doing their best to rebuild the bridge they had burned. But forgiveness wasn't easy. Every time I saw Jake, I remembered the pain of that day, the way he had walked away without even trying to defend me. It wasn't something I could forget overnight. Still, I could see that he was genuine in his efforts. He wasn't the same man who had left me standing alone in that wedding hall. One day, he asked to meet me at the park where we used to go when we were dating. I hesitated, unsure if I was ready for what he might say. But something in me told me to go. When I arrived, he was already there, holding a small bouquet of daisies, my favorite flowers. He smiled nervously as I approached. "Nancy," he began, "I know I've said this 100 times, but I need you to hear it again.
I'm so sorry.
I let you down in the worst way possible, and I'll never forgive myself for that. But I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life making it up to you if you'll let me." I looked at him, my heart heavy with emotions I couldn't quite untangle. "Jake," I said slowly, "what happened at the wedding? It broke something in me. It made me question everything, including us. But I can see how hard you've been trying, and I can see that you mean it. If we're going to move forward, it has to be on new terms. No more doubts, no more letting other people influence our lives. It has to be about us, and only us. His eyes lit up with hope. Absolutely, he said, taking my hands in his. It's just us from now on. I promise. For the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace. Maybe we could rebuild what we had lost. Maybe there was a future for us after all. Months later, we had a small, intimate wedding. It wasn't the grand affair we had originally planned, but it was perfect in its simplicity. Surrounded by close friends and family, including my dad, who beamed with pride, I said I do to the man who had fought to win back my trust. As I looked into Jake's eyes, I knew this was the beginning of a new chapter, one built on honesty and resilience. Sophia's shadow no longer loomed over my life. She was serving her sentence, and her name was rarely mentioned in our family anymore. My father continued to rebuild his life, and our relationship grew stronger every day. And Lily, my steadfast, loyal cousin, remained my rock, reminding me of the strength I had found within myself. In the end, I realized that the scars Sophia had exposed on my wedding day weren't something to be ashamed of. They were a part of my story, a testament to everything I had overcome. They were proof that I could rise from the ashes, stronger and more determined than ever. As I stood in my new home with Jake, looking out at the city skyline, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. My journey hadn't been easy, and there were moments when I thought I'd never recover from the pain. But I had survived. I had fought back. And I had reclaimed my life. Sometimes I think back to that moment at the wedding when Sophia tore my dress and exposed my scars. What she thought would be my downfall turned out to be my greatest source of strength. She showed the world my vulnerabilities, but she also gave me the courage to stand tall and fight for what I deserved. This is my story, a story of betrayal and revenge, but also of resilience, justice, and finding love again. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. No matter how dark things seem, there's always a way to rise again. You just have to believe in your own strength,